Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you joining us in today, we welcome you in. As you can tell by the backdrop, we're going to be talking about planes today. Now, I don't happen to have a model of the Dash 8 hanging around, so this old play toy from the 1980s will have to simply take its place. But we're talking about the Downsview strike. Now, if you don't live in Canada and you don't know anything about this, don't panic. I'm going to hold your hand and take you through this. Because by the end of this journey, you're going to get to see exactly how nested the aerospace industry is. And indeed, all corporations are. In the beginning, Downsview Air Force Base used to be an Air Force base. A unique little moment in Silverlight's life. When I was in basic training, they dragged us from Borden down to Downsview, just so that way we could parade in front of some officers, and they trucked us all the way back up to Borden to continue our day. Somewhere in the 90s, I forget exactly when, they closed the air base down. They still did keep some military bases going, but there was always a heavy industrial presence there. The base itself was set up before World War II and during World War II, so that it would be able to send troops and reinforcements and spare parts and supplies to the battlefronts in Europe, and less so in the Pacific, mostly so in Europe. The factories there are really old. Like, you stand beside them and you can feel that 1920s to 1940s energy just reaming off of them. The stone is old and bleached. There's just that era of mania around them that cannot be described. But anyways, back more towards present times. This is where they manufacture the de Havilland Dash 8 aircraft. Unlike our representative here, the de Havilland Dash 8 is a two-propellered civilian, basically transport cargo hybrid kind of aircraft. If you have to deliver airmail or if you have to get people from A to B, it's there. It's relatively inexpensive, especially compared to the Boeing products or even in comparison to the Russian and Chinese offerings. Medium range, propeller designed, so it uses relatively cheap fuel as compared to the kerosene that they use in the jets. And it's also, since it's piston driven, it's pretty easy to maintain. This thing's been in production since 1984. And they keep finding customers for it because people like reliable things. People like reliable things that don't crash. Well, the parent company, Victoria Air in BC, which bought the rights to all the existing de Havilland planes back in 2006, has decided they want to close the Downsview plant down. The workers in the plant are understandably pretty annoyed about this. Their people are still buying the Dash 8. And they're protesting Victoria Air because they've negotiated with the landlords, and the landlords are willing to keep the plant around. They don't want to be breaking it down. This isn't one of those deals where the city's trying to get them out or the landlords are trying to get them out. No, this is a case where the landlord's saying, yes, we enjoy having your rent money, please stay. Especially in an area like that. Like, if that person leaves, you're going to have to rip it down and rebuild it for somebody else. Being a landlord, I think I might have covered that before. If not, boy, that is an excellent topic for another time. So the main issue you have are Toronto workers arguing with a company in British Columbia, the opposite side of the continent, trying to keep their jobs, when that company on the other side of the continent thinks they can relocate and do it somewhere else cheaper. So their first thought is well, Silverlight. This happens everywhere. But one person wants to close down the jobs and move them somewhere else. Why is this so interesting? Because Viking Air in BC may own the rights to Dash 8 and may own the plant, and you might say they're not the final boss in this fight. Viking Air was established in 1970, and it was basically there to hoover up all the assets it could find. So it got a hold of the rights to the de Havilland manufacturing. It got a hold of rights to the Twin Otters and all sorts of other aircraft that are utility purpose. They have design agreements with several companies in the United States, including Grumman Aerospace. They're pretty well connected. But you know the way Silverlight works. We don't just look at the surface. The surface is this is a conflict between workers and their bosses. It's never just that. You have to dig further. This is why, again, years ago in Silverlight's past, the students were going down to protests at City Hall because tuitions went up. And I had the article in front of me that said City Hall had increased spending that year. They'd given more money to the students. It was the Board of Governors who had raised the tuition. Nobody wanted to hear me. It just shows from a very young age, Silverlight was there combing through the headlines, looking for the truth. And I'm still doing that. So I looked up Viking Air, and I came across the fact that they're owned by Longview Aviation. Longview Aviation has controlling interest in Viking Air, which has been going around hoovering up assets. So who are these Longview Aviation types? They're a consolidation company. So they go around buying controlling interest in various companies and making sure they are the ones that are in the driver's seat. And that's all fine and dandy, but this means that the people who are protesting to Viking Air really should be going after Longview Aviation, because Viking Air controls some of the shots, but they're the puppet in all of this. They're not the drivers. They are being told they have to meet a target, and they're having to make it. So as long as the workers are concentrating just on Viking Air, they're not going to get anything done. Now, Longview Aviation is owned by Sherry Birdson. The reason you don't know this name is because she's one of the Roy Thompson grandchildren. We'll get to who Roy Thompson is in a little bit. Now, Sherry and her brothers own something called the Woodbridge Company, which is a holding company yet again. And they hold controlling interests in securities and all sorts of things. Now, Sherry Birdson has a 24% ownership in the Woodbridge Company. Her brothers control the rest of the Woodbridge Company. So, you see what I mean about nesting dolls here? What started off as de Havilland, which they only have the rights to that name and that design, is owned by Viking Air. Viking Air is owned by Longview Aviation. Longview Aviation is owned by the Woodbridge Company, which is based in Toronto. So what at first seems to be this cross-country fight between the new money on the West Coast and the old money on the East Coast turns out to be millionaires playing in their own backyards. But the workers don't know that. They only know who their boss is. The newspaper articles don't know this. They only go after Viking Air and say, how are you shutting down this plant? Meanwhile, the bigwigs at Viking Air are just like, we're following instructions, which is completely the truth. They are following instructions from Longview or from the Woodbridge Company. They're saying that factory can be replaced. They can be making bigger, better jets, bigger, better transports, whatever it is, at a cheaper price by eliminating whatever redundancies and having a more modern factory. Now, it is true the factory that they are working out of is in dire need of renovations. And no sane company would ever sink so much as a penny into renovating something that old. So, there's two possibilities here. Either Viking Air, Longview Aviation, or the Woodbridge Company will give them a stay of education. They'll say, okay, we agree to your terms. The workers' specific words were, as long as there are orders for the Dash 8, they get to keep their jobs. They'll say sure, and they'll never get another order for it again. They'll push their other products. You've got 3 levels of companies on top of them. Do you think they can't tell their salesmen, don't worry about pushing the Dash 8. Push this other thing, push that other thing, push anything else, let that die. So even if the workers win, they're going to wind up losing. The deck is too stacked against them. There's too many levels of money. And you know what else is involved in this? The Woodbridge Company? Roy Thompson. For those of you who are in Toronto, you might be familiar with Roy Thompson Hall, which is a very popular concert theater. It's an entertainment venue in general, named after Roy Thompson. Now, Roy Thompson was a pretty significant media magnate. In the 1930s, he was opening up a radio station. He ran newspaper stations. And the Woodbridge Company today still holds that tradition. They still have the control of the media. They still have control of radio. They still have control of newspapers. And I'm not too sure what their internet presence is like. Didn't really have that much time to research it, but I'm pretty sure they have their own providers and their own services, all that sort of stuff. But this is why, ultimately, as human beings, as citizens, we have to stand together. This whole schmozzle of all these workers in Downsview losing their jobs is because of 3 billionaires in their backyard who are sitting there probably snickering at the fact that they're going to make millions either way, and families will be torn apart. People will go broke. They will lose everything because they need that job. But these billionaires, through their multiple fronts, don't care. And it's not like the money's even going out of town. It's not like it's, somebody from overseas who bought it out and wants to transfer the jobs overseas. No. It's our own local, homegrown talent that's kicking our workers in the tail after everything that we've been through, after a pandemic, after the recessions that we've had and the one that's coming. Here they are safeguarding their assets. What good corporate citizens they are. This is a lot of information. I had to take notes on this just precisely because of how nested it was, and so that I could drop names like Sherry Birdson and Roy Thompson. Because if there is anybody in Toronto, I would encourage you to do some more research into this. Think of this as a primer. And my main purpose for going through this list was mostly just so I could show the levels, going from the intellectual rights of de Havilland, who designed their stuff in the 1970s, to Viking Air, that was founded in 1970 but bought those rights in 2006. And the rights specifically say they have the right to continue the line, and if they want to, they can innovate and make new additions. Now, it would be fantastic to have a Dash 8 Mark II, where you go through, you put in new updated motors, you make things better, whatever it is. But no, that's not what they want. But Viking Air is also not the one calling the shots, because Longview Aviation owns them. Again, Sherry Birdson owns Longview Aviation, and she, with her brothers, all own the Woodbridge Company in Toronto. It's dizzying. But this isn't actually typical of finance and how companies work. This exact holding situation is what happened to Sears. A holding company like the Woodbridge Company. Now, I'm not accusing the Woodbridge Company of anything. They seem to be legitimately interested in making money, but a holding company came in and acquired Sears. And they stripped away all the Sears used to have massive amounts of property all over the place. They owned a whole lot, including the Sears building in Chicago. And the holding company promptly stripped them of all their real estate assets, just funneled it off into another company, taken it, gone. And then they wouldn't spend a penny on the stores and then let evolution take its place. Since Sears wasn't getting the ability to compete with anybody, they weren't getting new commercials, they weren't getting new products, they weren't getting new anything. Same old stores, same old products, and eventually you wind up getting shut down. Well, that's what's happening to those workers in the plant in Downsview. They're getting no money spent on them, and even if they do win a reprieve, it's only going to be for a short time. I feel bad for them. There's a lot of people working there. A lot of people have been working there for generations. And here we are watching them get dismantled by 3 billionaires whose grandfather and whose father made so much money that it's beyond, it beggars belief. Get ready to hearing a lot more of these stories, not from the Silverlight Show, not from the Silverlight channel, but in general. You're going to see companies making cuts, but never look at the first level. Hence why I told you a couple of personal stories today. The first level is never the proper level. You always have to dig deeper. It's like being on a phone conversation with anybody. Unless the first answer is to your liking, never take it as the final answer. Unless what you're asking for is impossible, which, yeah, it does happen. But that's the way economic institutions are built. They're like Russian Matryoshka dolls, the nesting dolls, where you open it, there's another one inside. You open it, there's another one inside. There was a couple old cartoon gags based on that. It's an old trope. And you know what? That's the way companies like it, because that way, God forbid Viking Air in British Columbia goes under, then Sherry Birdson just absorbs it in her Longview Aviation and writes it off. Oh well. And that's literally all that's happening here. Rich, super rich people are just saying, oh well, not my problem. And hundreds and thousands of people are affected. Hundreds of people in the plant and all the people that they buy from. There's the other part that we don't concentrate on enough. If you lose a job, that person is no longer going to go out and buy a car. That person is not going to go out and buy a house. That person is going to switch from buying premium organic coffee to whatever the cheapest kind of coffee is. I'm sorry. I used to be a heavy coffee drinker, but Silverlight gave that up over a decade ago. The point being, a billionaire's decision puts not only one plant out of jobs, but can also make local businesses lose jobs. And even the big ones like Walmart, when they say, oh, look, nobody's buying the premium coffee, we shouldn't stock it. We'll stock the cheap stuff instead. That means the premium coffee company isn't selling as much. It's kind of like you liked the fuse on a bomb. And remember the old way they would show it would trickle out kind of like dominoes and just go along and it would burn everything it touched? That's exactly what we're seeing in this de Havilland strike. And it happens everywhere all over the world because the rich are not stupid. They protect their assets. And you know what? Their assets mean more than anything that you have. So if you're listening to this before going to work, have a good day at work. But remember, unless you're one of the elites, your boss has a boss that he answers to, whether you know it or not. We wish to thank you for listening to the Silverlight Show. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. And we hope everybody has a fantastic day.